So do you have Davinci Resolve crash anytime you try to import media? It might be because your computer does not meet the minimum requirements in order to run modern day Davinci Resolve. Now, when I say when it crashes, I've seen this happen before where maybe you'll go off on the other monitor here, grab out of a folder, any type of video or picture, anything like that, drag it over into Davinci Resolve and let it go on your timeline or in your media pool, and just the program will just instantly close. Or if you do it the other way to find new media and import it this way, it will then also crash as soon as you click to import it. Well, what you need to do in order to check your minimum specs, if you do not know, is go ahead and hit Control, Alt, hold those down, and then push Delete. Now it'll bring you up to the blue page right here, where then you can click Task Manager, and then that will bring up where you can check exactly what the specs are of your computer. At least check the stuff that you need in order to tell if you reach the minimum specs for Davinci Resolve. First off, we're going to look at the CPU up at the top. I have a Ryzen 7 3700. Now, it says for the minimum specs, you need at least a Ryzen 7 or an Intel i7. Now, this is pretty vague because depending on the year, it's going to vary how powerful that one particularly is. But the Ryzen 7 3700X is 8-core, 16-thread. But I will tell you that I was actually at one time, I was using Davinci Resolve on a 3200G, a Ryzen 3 3200G. So technically it will run on lower stuff, but it is not what they recommend, because I will tell you from experience, occasionally in the middle of projects, it would just crash because it just couldn't handle it. So I have the Ryzen 7 3700X, so I meet the minimum requirements there. Like I said, i7 for Intel or a Ryzen 7 is generally what they say is minimum requirements for the CPU, but they recommend an i9 or a Ryzen 9, which are quite expensive. Those are kind of high end. A Ryzen 7, I haven't had really any problems unless you're doing way harder core editing, and if you are, you probably aren't going to need to watch this video. So Ryzen 7 is probably fine for you. Now for memory, they recommend 16 gigs. I always had 16 gigs of memory. I've never tried it on lower, so I don't know about that, but I actually upgraded from 16 gigs to 32 gigs because RAM for your computer is relatively cheap. A 2-pack of 2 8-gig sticks was like 60 bucks, 70 bucks, 80 bucks if you get into some more expensive stuff. So it's not an expensive upgrade if you have all 4 slots in order to put more memory into your computer. But at least this way you can come into here and check and see. I have 32 gigs. You need to have at least 16 according to what they say. And like I said, I've never been able to test to see if it run on more budget systems with lower RAM than that. So, and the next one that is super important, this is going to be probably the most important, is your graphics card. Now, they say for the graphics card, you need to have at least 4 gigs of RAM, of VRAM for your graphics card. And I used to use a graphics card that was a 4 gig card. Now I upgraded to an 8 gig card. 8 gig is what they recommend for the requirements. So it worked, like I said before, when I was using that 3200G and the 4 gig card, that's when it would crash occasionally when I was right at the minimum requirements for the graphics card, but my processor was actually under. So you can technically run it, and the program is free. You can try to run it on something lower, but if you're having these problems, if your graphics card has a much lower amount of RAM than you need, you're gonna have a lot of problems, I would suspect. Now, like mine right here does not say, you know, AMD Radeon 6600 8GB card. You might have to Google this if you don't know. Just type in the name of your graphics card, how much RAM does it have, and it should pop right up with ease. So that is, just remember, just to recap, just real quick, the minimum requirement on the CPU is a i7 for Intel or a Ryzen 7, 16 gigabytes of RAM, 4 gigabytes of VRAM on your graphics card, so at least a 4 gig graphics card. So I would definitely go with that, and it is highly recommended that you have an SSD of some kind today nowadays, whether it's a regular SSD or an NVMe SSD. Those are going to be faster. They're obviously smaller and stuff too. So I don't know that it says that for minimum requirements you need an SSD, but I don't know if that's literally a requirement. It wouldn't really make sense that it would be, but it would just be astronomically better for your editing speed, and they're not that expensive. You should probably get yourself one. So those should probably let you know right there if you meet the minimum specs for Davinci Resolve. If you don't, that's probably why it's not working. You might need to try yourself a different editor.